Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the High Vibe Living podcast with Erin, Liberty, and friends. I have somebody in the studio today who is just a remarkable human being, somebody who I met probably like 20 years ago. And, we were on a volleyball team together. I feel like we didn't even really get to go deep. And when I put out the call, if there was anybody who wanted to share a message or have a platform, Kara reached out right away, and I had the opportunity to do a deep dive and understand more about who you are as a writer, the work that you do for women. And I was just so impressed. And I thought to myself, how did I not know about this? And that's what I love about this podcast is the opportunity to sit down with all these amazing people and just myself, even personally, to learn so much more about you and who you are. So welcome, Kara Smith.
Thank you, Erin. Good to see you.
Good to
Great to
see
see
you
you.
too. I'm so grateful that you said yes to this opportunity. I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our platform, to the High Vibe Living community, and just share a little bit about who you are. And you get to take this wherever you want.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I just love how joyful your vibe is. And I think that's a great part of women speaking with each other as well. So I'm an educational researcher. I worked at the University of Windsor and now the University of Highlands and Islands. And my family's from Scotland originally, the Western Hebridean, which is off on the Western Atlantic Ocean, the Isle of Lewis. And yeah, I guess my life has always been sort of a hybrid, almost a dual identity. So when I'm back in Canada, when I'm back in Ontario, people say, "Oh, welcome home," and then when I'm in Scotland, they say the same, "Welcome home." How was
I
your
love that.
holiday? Yeah, and it's always been a bit of split existence, which I think a lot of migrants and immigrants feel that they never really belong to one place or the other, but a bit of both. And certainly that's been my experience at the in the Isle of Lewis. Is there's so many Indigenous parts of being a woman in the Western Isles in Scotland that are very similar to a colleague of mine. I work with outside Sarnia, Elder David Plain of Omshawang as well. So, and we often compare notes on how similar the societies and the communities are. So some I've written about informally in my blog, travelingprofessor.blogspot, but also, in papers and so forth too, when I'm looking at women in leadership and women living their lives,
Mhm.
women discovering their lives and how different their lives can be from men really, and how they approach life is very different from men as well.
I love that. Well, and it's so interesting because in the work that I do, we often talk about the duality of the masculine and the feminine, and we all have those different aspects of us.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like there's gender roles that sort of define who we should be. And as you know, like Western society versus, in the Isles, it's so completely different. And I feel like our environment sometimes leads us in different directions. And so for me personally, as a woman, but also I see this for men as well. Like I was in two very, well, actually now three very male dominated industries. And I had to find myself and my
Yeah.
voice through those experiences. And I feel like I've really come back to that feminine aspect of me. And so when you talk about, your experience of being in Ontario and your experience of being in Ireland, I would love to hear your perspective on, yourself, even personally. Do you feel like the environment sort of determines a bit of who you are, or whether or not it's you sort of taking both those aspects of yourself and bringing that culture forward?
Oh, I do. I think such a great connection there, Erin, because I think most women are, women tend to live as a collective. We have girlfriends we're really close to that
Mm-hmm.
are like family. And if we have something go wrong in our life, it's the women in our lives we seek out first to comfort, to advise us. And that's really sort of a collective approach to living. And I think that's why um, why women are so grounded in family, in work relationships, identifying toxic work relationships as well,
Mm-hmm.
because they approach work and life from a collective. The group is important to women,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's their female girlfriends or their family or their work friends and colleagues. That cohesion within the group is really important to women. It may be important to men as well, but men do tend to, in my experience, tend to live life more as an individual. Um, they're less likely to seek out their friends as their wives or partners would. I think it is a big difference, and we're sort of connected to that community, that environment, and evolve from what's there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's so interesting, especially in the work that I do in the high vibe living community. We are seeing a lot more men come forward and recognize
Yeah.
that there is a space for them in a supported community. And I think that's part of our environment. We've been conditioned and taught that the men have it all figured out. They don't need the support of, the collective or the community, because that's their role in society, is to be the leaders and to be the ones who bear it all, and to feel that strength. But that's more, and I'm using the word ego not from a negative space, but from the understanding of our ego sometimes is what drives us within our thoughts and where we go in our life. And it's more, when I say ego, it's more about how we internalize our experiences and our own perceptions of what's happening to us in our lives. And I think because women tend to look externally and perceive the impact of their existence on other people, and I feel like men, they tend to do the opposite. And so when we come together in a community where women are teaching men that there is that value in using the collective and bringing others together, versus women actually looking at their own inner power and their own inner strength, I think that we can really learn from the masculine and the feminine, and from breaking down the gender walls in our environment, to say that we each need both. And when you were speaking, it made me think also about some work that I've done in relationships, and how we both need someone who has that more feminine aspect and someone who brings forward that masculine at different times in our lives. And so I remember this teaching about relationships and how important it is to step back and be the observer of your experience or the situation, to be able to view what the other person needs in that moment. And I remember thinking about my own personal relationship with my husband and thinking, you know what? I need to change my role in moments like that. If he's perceiving a situation where he doesn't feel supported, even though I know that maybe he wants to do it on his own, sometimes he needs for me to bring forward that, what you're saying is more of like the feminine aspect of community and support, to show him that he's not alone, and vice versa. I need to remember that, when he's in his masculine, that he doesn't necessarily need or want my support. And then that actually is having a negative impact on the ego.
Yeah.
So it's just an interesting perspective.
It is. And it's interesting that you're so thoughtful about that, because and I know we come from similar. Well, I grew up with brothers, and I have two sons, just as you do too. So
Mm-hmm.
I did grow up in a world of men. But it's interesting that you approach that from that collective stewardship approach, stepping back, how can I help? Or do I need to support as well? I read some, and I wish I would have read this 20 years ago, for example. But it was a while ago, and it was on raising children.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we're often giving love, I'll do this for you. Um, I'll help you with this, thinking that we're providing love for our children by doing it, because we can do it. We're capable. Women are capable. And so why shouldn't we provide those gifts, provide those skills to our children, to our loved ones by helping them? But the paper I was reading is that the message it actually sends is, I don't believe you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm going to do it for you. And
Uh-huh.
that was mind blowing for me, um, because in my mind, it was true. I thought I was giving love, but the message I was actually sending to my sons, to the men in my life, was, I don't trust you to do it. I don't believe you can do it. So I'm going to do it for you instead of just, letting them get on with it or struggle on their own. Um, and so, yeah, that was an interesting part of it. And I guess it's just hardwired in us. Like we want to serve.
Mm-hmm.
We want to build the community. We want there to be peace in our homes. We want there to be sort of loving relationships, and so we construct, create, go the extra mile to make sure that that's what's there, that people are getting along in our communities, in our families, in our friend groups, um, because, women feel more comfortable when things are organized, when things are peaceful. They're more relaxed. You're not stressed. It's easier to have a life like that.
I can relate to what you're saying so much. It's so interesting because, as you know, I was in the male dominated industries. I was in corporate. I spent 20 years kind of
Yeah.
trying to break through the glass ceiling, and I was really successful. But when I look back on that time in my life, I really was taking control of my situations, which was great on one hand, but I got to a point where, like you said, like I was trying to really control everything. And it felt like, and I think a lot of women can relate to this, whereas like, I have to do everything myself. And it's interesting because the duality is that men are feeling that way as well, but we're all taking control of different aspects. And I heard something one time and it really, really resonated with me. And then I started to study it, was this concept of like, when you think about it as a soul having a human experience, the spirituality aspect of it is that everyone's here for a purpose. We all have our own, we'll call it soul contract. Every experience is laid out for us. So if I'm intervening in your experience, and this really hit home for me with my family, my children, they can experience life younger, where they learn to adapt and know who they are earlier. Or if I'm sort of creating an environment that is so safe and so structured and so controlled that they're not going to experience how to, work through those things on their own, manage their own emotions. And so I'm so grateful that I learned this while I still had the opportunity to step back and allow my children to go through their own experience the way that they're meant to, because I really believe, and again, looking back on my own corporate career and sort of massive life change in 2020, I was trying to control things, but I could see that there were patterns there. There were cycles and patterns that I continued to repeat. And, looking at now that I'm observing it from my own sort of soul perspective, I'm able to see that I was trying to control situations, but really I just had to surrender and let them happen. And so when we apply that now back as a mother, as a role, I really try to step back and use words with my children like, what does that feel like for you? What feels like the right thing to do? And just really allow them to take control back of their own experiences. And I found, especially with my youngest now, he's really the one who's taken responsibilities for controlling his own emotions or for working through situations on his own. And I'm there as a support, but I'm not controlling it. And I feel like my children have really thrived in that environment because it allows them to make mistakes, but also for them to be the leader in their own experiences, which is such a beautiful thing to see as a
It
parent.
is, yeah. And they will construct the person that a different person probably from who as they've grown as well. Yeah, that's a
Mm-hmm.
great example. There's a Mazer and Mazer book called How to Talk So Children Will Listen and
Mm-hmm.
How to Listen So Children Will Talk. But there's also, you were just reminding me of in your corporate role, trying to control things. There's this wonderful fable. Well, I think we call it a fable, but it's so entwined in our lives growing up in the Scottish Isles that I just think of it as sort of a real story from time to time. But it's about a selkie. I'm going to put the name in the chat here for you if you haven't heard of it. A selkie is a seal woman, and some people will be familiar with this story, maybe. But the seal woman comes ashore, and she takes off her skin and her seal skin, and then she's a woman, and she may meet a man on the mainland or on the island, and the man steals her skin
Mm-hmm.
so that she can stay with him and have children and be his wife and so forth. But even though she fits into the human world, even though she's a wife, a mother, a woman there, she's always searching for her skin. That part of herself that is innately hers.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, she adapted to the human world and she's able to live and work and love there, but it's not quite a fit. It doesn't fit as well as her own skin. And the fable always ends with her, usually her daughter, finding her original skin that her husband has hidden from her. She puts her skin back on, later in life and returns to the sea that's hers. And I just love that as a metaphor because I think a lot of women do go through life trying to fit into other occupations or organizations or situations. Yes, they may make it work for a time, but it's not innately who they are. They're always trying to return to their original skin, the person that they are. And it's too bad that we spend most of our lives searching for the skin, searching for who we are, and it's only after we sort of come to that realization that we feel sort of an inner peace,
Mm-hmm.
joy, comfort, right? So
Yeah, I love that fable so much. And I think that telling it in a story like that is just so impactful. I talk a lot in the high vibe living community about authenticity, and I can relate to that fable and to the Selkie so much because I do think, and not just as women, I think as individuals, we're influenced by so much. We're influenced by our environment. We're influenced by our parents. We're influenced by, to the extent of which we allow, but we're influenced by others' perceptions of us. Over time, and this is what happened to me, is that over time I lost completely who I was. I've always been a pure-hearted, loving, intentional person. And I found myself in these environments where, and I'll never forget this, but I had a senior leader who said to me, Erin, other people's perception of you is your reality. And I found myself in this situation. We were going through a merger, and I would be hearing these things about myself that were like, she's only out for herself. Like, she just wants to climb the corporate ladder. And I remember experiencing this disconnect and saying, that is not who I am. And, like, why am I not being able, and this, at the time, this was my perspective, like, why can't people see me for who I really am? But the thing was, is that I hadn't put my skin back on, that I was adapting so much to the environment around me to be in that masculine energy and to be who I thought I had to be and who people told me I had to be in order to succeed in that environment. And I think for me, and I feel like this, every single person that I mentor or work with in the high vibe living community, I see the same thing, is that we lose ourselves. But I really feel like this is what's meant to happen in life, is we're born to our authentic light. And then we become molded and influenced by our environments and the people around us. We lose ourselves, right? Only to have it all. And in my story, I had everything. I had all of the money, the family, the everything. And then to feel like I had inside, I didn't know who I was and I had lost it all. And to go on this journey of self-discovery, to really come back home to who I was in my true authenticity. And when I finally did that, and this is like what is so beautiful about this, and this is why I want everyone to hear this message from you, is because when you come back home to yourself, and you feel what it feels like to be in that skin and that authenticity, you can feel that that's where you're meant to be. And that's when you're the most powerful. And so for me, as soon as I left that environment and I allowed myself to come back home, I was a better mother, a better wife. More abundance came to me. I felt at home. I connected to my greater purpose. And then my gifts started coming in and shining.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of that, I say in my book that I'm writing, I took the long way around. It's not about losing time or, it's about collecting all of that information about yourself so that you know what doesn't feel authentic. When you finally come back to yourself, and you're connected to a higher power. And when you shine your light, that's when you give back to the world. And so I love that fable so much. I love the Selkie. And I want everyone to find their skin and put it back on, right? You don't need anyone else's permission.
No, exactly. Yeah. Well, there's, I think there's lots of evidence in nature of, I love that, I don't know, what you just said, the long way around. And I know that across, different worlds and literatures, there's always the three phases of women.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the woman as a girl, and the woman as a mother, mothering, and we have the wise woman, the
Mm-hmm.
older woman. And so I think it is, an evolution of change and transformation for women over their lives. And I think these transformations, they do take time. It is a long way around, no matter what space you happen to be occupying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's there's standing stones all across the Western Isles where I
Mm-hmm.
live. And the standing stones are called the Cailleachin, the Callanish,
Mm-hmm.
in Gaelic. And Cailleachin means the old women. So the stones are seen as, so in Gaelic, the standing stone means old wise woman. And the main set of stones in Callanish on the Isle of Lewis look over onto these hills. They're called the Cailleach na Moitach, which means sort of, well, locally they're called Sleeping Beauty, but it means the woman of the hills. And if you look at them, there's 12 sets of stones in total. But if you look at the one from the east, she looks like a maid and in the hills, and she's called Sleeping Beauty in English, but so she looks like a woman laying down in the east at the beginning of her journey. And then in the middle of the island, she looks pregnant because there's another hill sort of behind the Sleeping Beauty hills. So she looks like the mother. And then when you get to the main set of standing stones in Lewis, the Cailleachin, she looks like an old woman, like a hag, as we've typically referred to her. So if you think of those, I think it's lovely that it's represented that way across our landscape.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, it's recognized that these are the stages of our lives. And these are the gifts that we bring with us to the world as women. You know, the joy of a young woman, a young girl, we give life into the world as a mother, and we protect life and sustain life. You know, if mothers are the reason that the human species has evolved and survived. And then as an old woman, we take with us, you know, a Cailleachin, which I consider myself a Cailleach, an old woman now, I suppose. But we take with us this wisdom, just as you have, Erin. You know, these realizations that you've come to at this stage, you know, they didn't evolve from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a lot of women, a lot of knowledge that went into all you know now, as a wise woman. So,
Mm-hmm.
so your journey, your roundabout journey, was important,
Mm-hmm.
because you were gathering that wisdom as you went.
Exactly. Oh, I love that so much. And I was just reflecting too about what you said about how we see it in nature all the time. And I mean, it is a life cycle. And it's like, a lot of us look at the past or look at things that have happened in our life. And I feel working with clients, they first come to me and they have so much shame and judgment for
Yeah.
experiences in their life. And it just breaks my heart because I feel like it's all our perspective on that, right? And had you not gone through what you did, like there's so many people out there who are speaking about abuse or speaking about alcoholism or
Mhm.
addiction or talking about manifestation or all of these things. And had they not been where they were, had they
Yes.
not taken the long way around and had all of those experiences, they wouldn't be able to springboard and help people. And I always think about it, it's like a ladder. There's, no one who is any better or any further along than anyone else, but there's always somebody who's on that ladder looking up at somebody who's, a rung higher, or somebody who's looking back and saying, I was where you were and I can share my experience with you, or I want to go where that person is going. And I feel like we are all mirrors for one another. And, we have to have pride and we have to look back at our experiences and realize that we're not starting over. And that's why I think so many people feel fear about, like waking up at age 40 and realizing I've spent my whole life working towards, and in my situation, building this career and labeling myself as a corporate senior leader or an accountant, and then waking up to realize that's not really who I am at all. And I just did those things and continued seeking and searching because that's what the world told me I should need or want. And I think had I not had all of those experiences, I wouldn't be able to be the person I am today, or to speak and teach the way that I have. Like, I know now that the reason why I had so many roles and the reason why I lost myself to find myself was to guide the way and to show people that you can start over at any age. Like, you can, you really, really can. And it's not starting over from ground zero. It's starting over with everything that you have learned and brought with you. And it's really just a springboard. And the idea is that, and I use the term quantum leap, because, to be the highest version of ourselves, that person already exists inside of you. You just have to believe that that person's there. Like for you, for example, you are such a wonderful, educated, knowledgeable, kind human being. And I know just this much about you. And this is the first time that you're on a podcast. And I'm thinking, I kind of assumed that, being a published author and a researcher with all of your credentials, that I'm grateful that you would have even considered my podcast. You know what I mean? So it's like the idea that it's like all we have to do is face fear and take action despite of it. And there's this really amazing quote about courage. And it's courage is about facing your fears and taking action anyway. Like, we can stop at having the fear, or we can have courage and just take action. And that's exactly what you did. And you are helping so many people by sharing your voice on this platform today. It's just, that's what makes me so excited.
As you're talking about your learned gifts, your accumulated gifts, and it reminded me of you were fertilizing a future for yourself. And I often think of, I love being out for a walk in nature. And in the morning I try and get out, to the forest or a walk through trees. And the Gaelic alphabet is made up of 18 letters, which are all derived from trees
Oh,
originally, the
cool.
letters. Yeah. But often you'll see a tree, when I'm walking along, I'll see a tree in the forest that it looks like two trees, but it's one tree. So you can see the edges of the two trees that have grown together, and they might be slightly curved. And whenever you see that, it means there was an older tree there originally that was dying off as these two new trees were growing out of it. But to grow out of the old tree, the old knowledge, like your knowledge, was fertilizing the new growth. So those two trees that are growing up together and next to each other wouldn't be there if it weren't for that old tree, the old experiences. It provided the soil, the growth for something new. And that's what I think of when I think of your own experience. I mean, the joyful, high vibe Erin Liberty that is today is a result of that old growth, that old fertilizer that provided the nutrients you needed to be the woman you are now.
I love that. I love that so much. And it's so interesting how these metaphors can help us, because I remember hearing this saying one time about, you can't grow. You can't grow when you're not, planted in a place that is nurtured and grounded and fertilized, right? And so for me, I really felt constricted. That was the, the feeling that just kept coming up in my 3-year pattern was, I was searching and seeking for that external validation. And I was kind of, finding myself feeling limited. And now, there's so many people who just stay. And like this whole concept of like, we have an impact everywhere we go. But if we're not feeling like we can expand, evolve, and grow anymore where we're planted, we have to go somewhere else and seed a new foundation. And I keep thinking about what you're saying. And it's like, we're not only doing that for ourselves to forge a new path ahead, we're doing that for our legacy and for those that need to grow where they're planted. And for me, in the corporate environment, that's what was happening. And I remember when I went over to, it was a colleague of mine who had worked for me at one point, and I went to tell her that I had decided to leave the gas industry. And at the time, I was like a little thrown back by her response. But then after I reflected on it, it made so much sense. From her perspective, she said, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. It's going to be such a great opportunity for everyone else." Because with me there, right, in the role that I was playing and the trajectory of my career, I was taking up light, space, water, whatever fertilization from someone else, and it was their time to shine also. And I knew, and if we listen to our intuition and these signs,
Okay.
that really guides us when it's time for us to stay and when it's time for us to go. And that's how we all kind of work together, right, to create this environment, because every single person is here to evolve and grow. Every single person. And if you find yourself repeating the same patterns or staying planted, not only are you impacting your own growth and development, but you're not allowing others to shine their light either. And that can adapt to all different aspects of our life, including, like you were saying about our children and our relationships, right? It's just such an interesting web of how everything is all interconnected.
Yeah, that reminds me of the three sisters in Indigenous agriculture. So if you have a garden, the three sisters are beans, corn, and squash, and they support each other because they each have their own spaces. The corn requires the height. It's supported by the squash, which is fertilizing it at ground level, and the beans are able to grow up around the corn. But so you were stepping out to provide light and space for those that were there. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes we have to search for the meaning in things. And when I heard that, I was just like, that's a really interesting perspective. Not everything is about me. Yes, this was a massive change in my career and I needed to go find myself. But I think sometimes if we look at the external impact that our present and or our control is having on other people, it really allows us to understand what our role truly is. And I feel like when we surrender, and because like my belief is that it's already planned for us, right? And so we all have free will and we get to decide if we want to keep staying in this stuck pattern or if we want to surrender and go somewhere else. And there's all these different opportunities that come up for us. It's just whether or not we are in tune enough or aware enough to take that step. And so for me, I thought that was just such a great opportunity for me to reflect that, like, I am one person in billions, right? And that not everything is about us and our journey, and just how beautiful it is to see and allow others to shine and grow where they're planted.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's it's a good lesson. Good lesson from life.
So
women
I'm
are
curious. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, women are so infinitely more powerful than we give ourselves credit for, I think. Just within, if you think about the cycle of the monthly cycles, our bodies go through with rebirth and growth and life cycles with hormones through menstruation and menopause. And I'm just laughing to myself. Have you ever heard of Sheila Nagigs?
I haven't. No, tell me about her.
I'll put that in here too. just the word into the chat. But a Sheila na gig is you see them across the Western Scotland and the Hebrides and Ireland, and in pre-Christian structures, which are often old churches today. You know, 1,000-year-old, 2,000-year-old buildings. Above the doors of some of the churches and places, you'll see a stone sculpture of a woman, and it's called a Sheila na gig, and it just cracks me up every time I tell this story for those that don't know. But a Sheila na gig is a woman, and they used to put the sculpture of her over the door of entrances to churches or pre-Christian buildings. And so you see them all over the Western Hebrides and Ireland. And she has her legs splayed open and like vulva extended over the door of an entrance. And the idea was that it was like a warning. Like, this is how powerful this journey is. And I think the almost to ward off evil. And I think the idea early on is that women are the givers of life, and you know, in many respects, even if you think of it as a metaphor, they are. I mean, the relationships within your home, within your life, they exist usually because women are making those connections. But I just laugh every time I see one of these. You know, if you're going through a doorway, and an old, you know, thousands-year-old doorway, you see this woman with her legs wide open, representing power. It just cracks me up every time I see them.
I love that.
You know, we never put that over our doorways here, but
I've been to a lot of like old churches. Joe and I just did a trip to Italy, and I'm gonna have to go back because I took pictures of like thousands of doors. I'll have to go back and look. I don't know if I ever noticed that.
Yeah, let me know if you see a Sheila na gig in Italy. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
but
know.
certainly Ireland, like Celtic.
Yeah.
Celtic areas. So
Very cool. So cool.
yeah, it's funny.
So I know that I know that, and of course time always flies by so fast when we're just deep into such a great topic. And I know that you are so passionate about women and finding their purpose, and you know, just really helping them to know their power and to just really honor that. So, you know, for our community of amazing people who show up and listen to this podcast, is there anything else that you want to share with them? You know, it could be a story or an experience from your life or your teachings or your research. If you had one thing to leave the community, what would it be?
I think it would truly be just be true to yourself, find your skin. And I think, as you've already mentioned, Erin, you know, numerous times through your podcasts, it's important that you honor that. You know, women spend their lives honoring others. What do they need? Providing service, providing stewardship, making communities work. But they're not going to work unless you honor your own voice as well. You are not, you know, to be torn down as a result of the service you're giving. You need to honor your voice, and you know, it will guide you. So it's important to take time to find that self-guidance, to honor who you are as a woman.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, not only during this podcast, but also in your work. And I can see in your writing and in just your conviction here how committed you are to this subject. And I just want to say thank you for finding your skin so that you can be that light and that wisdom for other people. And we always share how to contact you, how to get access to your amazing body of work. So make sure that you guys check out the show notes so that you can go on this journey with Kara, and make sure that you follow along and read her work, because I'm telling you, it is so beautiful and so powerful and so thoughtful. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks for your service.